Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Token City Show. Today we have a very unique guest, one of the early pioneers of the blockchain industry. He co-founded Coinfirm right after the blockchain network was launched, and that company is today one of the main blockchain analytics companies in the world. Now he's doing the same with Copernic Space, the only marketplace in the world for space assets. His name is Grant Blaisdell, and it's a pleasure to have him here today. Hi Grant, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. Welcome to the show. As you know, I've been following your trajectory for a few years now, but I'm sure there's a lot of people watching us who would like to know a little bit about your journey. How about you tell us a little bit about it?
From a blockchain sense or in general? Because I can do both.
Yeah, as you like it.
Well,
as you
me
prefer.
Myself personally, I've been involved, let's say, in the startup space since I was a late teenager. So I had my first one when I was 19. I'm originally born in Southern California. That's where I had my first startups, where I was focused on digital media distribution platforms, how digital media is monetized, and how that monetization goes back to the rights holders or the creators. Partially, this was my focus because I've been doing music since I was a child, and that's the industry that I always wanted to affect the most. And that's also how I got into the blockchain technology market. Originally was I wanted to apply this technology. So around 2012-13, I wanted to apply this technology to digital media platforms, right? So I've been around this technology as a market for over a decade at this point, and has watched it mature both technologically, but obviously also as a market that is aware in the minds of business as well as the average person. And that eventually led me to becoming co-founder and chief marketing officer for Coinfirm, which, as you mentioned, is one of the leading analytics as well as AML platforms, anti-money laundering platforms in the crypto market. But I'm third generation Aerospace, so the story behind me starting Copernic Space actually starts with my grandfather, who helped build a national space program in Central Europe and Poland in the 60s and 70s, and has served as a legacy for me to build on when it comes to applying this technology to what's going to be the largest, most valuable and important market on Earth, ironically, which will be the space economy.
Okay, so yeah, as you mentioned, for you, Copernic Space is a love project. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, it fits into that story. My mother and I have been investing, so to say, ourselves into the space economy for a very long time. My mother longer than myself. And the reason I bring her up is because she's my co-founder. She's known as Lady Rocket in the market, and is a former Silicon Valley executive who also was responsible for taking a lot of big American tech companies into Central Europe. It's built on that legacy where we started investing in the space economy. We saw through our activities, especially around Vandenberg Space Force Base, that really the biggest need and the biggest opportunity sits around how do we build the commercial and financial infrastructure and the marketplace in the digital era and the digital economy era that connects, not only allows space companies to do business better, right, under a new model than they're already doing, but the holy grail is how do we connect the space market and what we call space assets with the wider commercial, consumer, and investor markets globally. So we started kind of investing in the idea of Copernic Space about 7 years ago. Blockchain tech wasn't mature enough yet to do what we really wanted to do. And even more importantly, market psychology, whether it's from the space market or from the technological blockchain market, wasn't yet there. But in 2020, I saw these two markets colliding, and the maturity of both the tech as well as the mentality, the psychology, getting to a certain point. So in 2020, I formally launched Copernic Space to serve as the marketplace and the foundation for this new space economy and space assets, what we call real world space assets and what we call financial space assets. A lot of people don't understand how big the space market already is. They only kind of see Musk and NASA and a little bit of Bezos. So they see a few billionaires and NASA and maybe ESA, European Space Agency, playing around this. But they don't understand it's already a $500 billion market. They don't understand usually how much does advancements in space or investments in space provide tangible results and benefits here on Earth. And a lot of people don't understand how viable and reachable of a market it actually can be, that it's not just for billionaires and a couple national agencies. So, you know, the values and the mission behind Copernic Space are extremely important, but it's also built on one of the biggest economic opportunities that we'll see in our lifetime, which is the democratization and creation of this new space economy that is accessible to everyone practically.
Agreed, agreed. We definitely share that mission as a whole for the tokenization economy, for the token economy. But for those who maybe are hearing about this for the first time, how would you describe in simple terms what Copernic Space does?
Copernic Space utilizes blockchain technology to enable space companies to tokenize their assets, whether that is payload within a rocket that they own, whether that is satellite imagery and related data, which we personally love at Copernic Space, or what we'll get into later on, which are these financial space assets, which represent a stake or share in a space company or even a space asset itself. So I'm not, you know, investing into the space company, but I'm investing into the assets they're creating that are generating revenue. So we enable these space companies to tokenize these assets, attach utilities where applicable, and list them on a marketplace to the wider commercial organizations, individual investors around the world, and create a peer-to-peer, secure, and seamless process between them to transact, and where applicable, have a secondary market to trade these space assets, which is also a big revolution when it comes to space in general. So once again, we're really building that commercial and financial infrastructure underlying this new space economy with the user interfaces and the marketplace on top that enables these space companies, their partners, other companies, individuals, etc., to interact, transact, utilize, and trade these space assets. So the revolution isn't so much in the idea of a marketplace for a newer, maturing market, but is more so in the revolution of how we're applying blockchain tech to do this, creating the business models, and doing it for the space economy, which is easier than people think, but is a very hard and challenging market at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't know if you knew this, Javier, but you know, a few months ago, Spain announced at the very least the launch or beginning of its own national space program and earmarked, I believe, 700 million euros towards it. So it's a market that any country or any big billionaire, as you've seen, are fighting to get into and have a strong position in, whether you're Spain or your countries like Rwanda or Nigeria in Africa. Yeah. All these nations are looking to invest more into the space economy.
Yeah. Well, I was not aware of what you just told us, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I know what I do know about the industry after I learned that you co-founded Copernic Space is that there are a lot of, like you said, it's a 500 billion market already, right? There's a lot of activity that doesn't necessarily reach the mass media. It would be great to find out a little bit about some of those projects, how you see the industry evolving at the moment.
Yeah, I'm very use case driven. So, with us, I can just give you some examples. So, for example, right now we're working with a company called Aerospace. They're one of 3 licensed reusable rocket providers in the United States, them, SpaceX, and Blue Origin, on tokenizing their cargo, so their physical space, placing that on our marketplace so that the wider commercial market not only has a place to easily discover this, but to acquire the rights to that physical space and utilize that physical space and send something up. And then we also utilize our platform to create new space assets out of things people are sending up, because if I'm sending something up into space, I'm creating a whole new asset that has some future economic viability and capability. So the reason I bring this up is because pretty soon you will see a marketplace, whether you want to send something up into space, which is called upstream, or you want to acquire satellite imagery or satellite data that can help you with agriculture or traffic or environmental concerns like pollution, etc. So you're going to have a marketplace to easily discover and acquire and use these real world space assets, right? And then in the very near future, you will have a similar model, but when it comes to investments, right? So venture capital, and there's a lot of comparisons actually to how the crypto market got created. Venture capital is generally not very well set for the needs of the space economy. It's usually quite high risk, quite high tickets, and the liquidity event timelines for your investment are like 20 years, to liquidate your investment. In the crypto market, remember really what launched the crypto market heavily were ICOs, token sales, etc., starting around 2017.
Yeah.
Right, and that was outside of the venture capital industry until later on. So, we want to also apply these models in a regulated manner that have already shown to work and revolutionize financing and apply them to space, which is a market where there's lots of needs for capital, but the models currently for how financing and capital is provided is not very well made for space, especially early stage ventures. So over the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to turn into a multi-trillion-dollar market. And the thing that's really going to facilitate that and turn it into the biggest market on Earth is how easy, understandably, does the wider commercial market, investor market have access into this economy. As any new technology, it's usually initially for the richer kind, and then it democratizes down, right? So through our marketplace, we're creating that model and pushing that boundary faster and further for the space market. So we want to bring that Amazon mixed with Robinhood sort of effect to space.
That sounds great. So yeah, you just basically described how your vision for Copernic Space. How do you see, like you said, it's a $1 trillion market. How do you see the company, let's say, with a timeline of 5 to 10 years? What's your vision for the company in that sort of timeline?
So, remember, I kind of place us as the commercial and financial infrastructure with this marketplace, yep, the user interfaces, applications on top.
Yeah.
So last year we launched Spaceables, which is a marketplace on our platform just dedicated to space culture, space art, etc. So this is where you can buy tokenized art. Mm-hmm. I believe we even have some music going on there, etc. This is never going to be the main business model behind us, but it's a way for us to emotionally engage and onboard space passionate people, creators around space, etc., onto our platform, and then transition them into our next two applications, which the one where we're launching right now, which we've been working with on space companies for almost the past 2 years on building these standards and cases for, is called SpaceMart. So that's focused on the real world space assets. So like, how do I access payload within a rocket or on a lunar lander going to the moon, right? How do I access satellite imagery and data, whether I'm a big corporation or, you know, I'm a single real estate guy who just wants to take a picture of, you know, my real estate development, or I'm a local government, right? Because most of these big satellite things, most of these space asset things are processes that take millions of dollars and take, you know, a year to contract, which eliminates majority of the commercial market out of it. So our focus this year is to release SpaceMart, which is for real world space assets. So once again, things like payload and satellite imagery. And next year, according to our roadmap, we focus on what is called Spacepool, which is the final application on our platform, right? And look at that as a DeFi financing application for space, right? So initially, it'll kind of start on more like a Gitcoin a la Kickstarter model, where projects can receive financing not under the viewpoint of investment. They'll get, let's say, an NFT back that represents some utilities or something like that. And later on, we'll go through the securities licensing ourselves or collaborating with certain partners that already have that, to offer direct tokenized investments into space ventures themselves or the assets they're creating, which is the model I really love. Because instead of investing into, once again, the company, into what are called security tokens, you'll be investing or financing their assets. So let's say I'm not investing into the satellite company, I'm investing into their new constellation of commercial satellites that are going to be generating revenue, and I'm going to earn a micro percentage of that future revenue for the liquidity I gave them to create that asset. And I think that's going to be an interesting model across a bunch of industries, like film, for example. Imagine I'm not investing into Universal, I'm investing into the new Avengers film, right? So this will also enable entrepreneurs to not give away equity, power in their company, go through that whole process, but focus on the assets themselves and the revenue that these assets generate. So we have a long-term plan, especially for blockchain-related companies. I'd say it's quite a wide and long-term plan. How that roadmap will move according to some things we'll see. But once again, we're building that commercial infrastructure and the financial infrastructure and placing the user interface, the applications on top of it. And we're not building this for Web3 users, right? As of now, there's still Web3 processes mainly dominating on the platform. But over the next year or two, we're looking to try to transition that out into where blockchain serves as that underlying foundation. But the user doesn't need to know that. Right? You know, I said pretty much from the beginning, since I got into this market, and, you know, especially now with the NFTs sort of thing, is that the success of this technology will be when hundreds of millions of people are using it, and they don't need to know about it to successfully use it. Just like we don't treat NFTs on our platform like most people treat NFTs. NFTs is a technology we utilize to act as a vehicle with certain features, functions, benefits, utilities for actual space assets, right? And I think that's the big misconception or the bad salesmanship of especially the NFT market, is like, hey, NFT is the asset. And it's like, no, NFT is a technology, once again, with certain features, functions, benefits for an actual asset. In our case, these space assets.
Definitely. Nobody needs to know how email works, right? We just need to use it. Yeah. Definitely.
Well, one more thing, you know, we're in that similar point right now. And, you know, when I said, you know, the Amazon effect and where we see ourselves as a company, you know, I compare a lot what's happening today in the market, especially what people are saying around crypto or NFTs or et cetera, to be something that was similar to what was said during the initial web boom and burst, right? Which is, you know, some famous genius people said, you know, email won't change the world any more than the fax machine. And then, you know, the dot-com bubble burst and people are like, see, this internet commerce thing, it's not a real thing. You know, people need to have perspective and on kind of history as well, and pattern recognition. And you know, I think crypto is going through a very similar moment. It's just, once again, I don't think crypto is a user interface technology, really. It's more of a back-end infrastructure technology. And once again, I think its success will be when, you know, people are using it and it's not in their face that they have to use crypto.
Yeah, you know, it kind of feels like the big milestone there is when we get the ability to connect, like, you know, real world information, data, you know, from outside of the blockchain into the blockchain. Kind of feels like that will be the moment in which, you know, the user interfacing side of things will finally click.
Well, can I add something to that real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, so that's one thing about space that is really unique as a market for blockchain tech. Because like I said, blockchain is really like, it's kind of an infrastructure technology in reality. It's more back end. Mm-hmm. So one thing has made it really hard for this technology to penetrate more of these markets. You know, we're talking about these real world assets like real estate, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. It's because you're dealing with markets that have decades and decades and decades of legacy system, bureaucracy, all this sort of stuff, regulations on top of it, et cetera, that make it harder to really penetrate and, you know, implement this technology on that infrastructure level. Space is different. Space hasn't had, the private market for space is very young. It didn't have the chance to, you know, go through its digitization phase yet, but it also didn't get a chance to really build these decades of these legacy systems, et cetera, related towards, you know, how it works commercially. So that's another reason why blockchain is particularly good for space, is because space is one of the few markets that you're really starting in the infrastructure. The infrastructure is just now being built for space.
Yeah, that's so interesting, really. I hadn't really thought of that. Actually, I hear you talk, and one can tell that you are becoming a true connoisseur, if that is the correct word, of the space. And it makes me think of how, you know, it's like you said, it's as an investment, it's all high stakes, right? It's not suitable for the VC kind of modus operandi. But in terms of as an industry, it's extremely make or break, right? It's very binary in terms of you either succeed or fail, and there's nothing in between, really, or so to speak. And in that kind of context, how do you, coming, so to speak, from another sector, how do you build trust? You have in your board of directors the former director for Aerospace at the U.S. Department of Commerce.
Department of Commerce, yeah.
Yeah, and you yourself, you have a NASA profile, and so does Copernic Space. So how does that come about? How do you manage in such a serious business, so to speak?
Well, one thing we want to show as a product, as a company, as our values, is that space is a lot more accessible and open than people realize. Part of that is, like, I think people in space like to make it seem like it's something very hard, you know, for their own benefit. But space, like I said earlier, space is extremely hard. Like, we're trying to make it easier. The building the trust thing is there's also cultural change happening in the space economy where, you know, it's been very dependent on government contracts, right? There's limited access to financing, right, and revenue. So a good portion of this new space economy, these new companies that are coming out, et cetera, they understand that they need to start looking in a different direction. And even the bigger, more traditional guys understand that the market is going to change, right? Like space is not going to be excluded from the digital commerce revolution, fintech, et cetera, right? But first and foremost, you need to, you know, have legitimate things you're trying to do, right? A lot of things in space sound crazy. For us, you know, we have some track record, you know, we had some track record in the space already. It's not like we're walking in off the street. I've invested years into understanding, you know, how this stuff works and how we could build a product or model that actually applies and works for the space economy. You know, we're looking to build a foundation for it that's here for decades to come, and not just, you know, abstractly shove crypto into the idea of space. I think you have to be obviously doing something exciting because it is space, but almost doing anything in space is technically exciting. I think you have to know what you're talking about to some degree. But the beautiful thing about space, just like I was talking about the infrastructure thing, is this new space economy needs every type of person, right? A big thing we try to do through like Our Lady Rocket Foundation, which is a foundation me and my mother have that's doing education programs around space in schools around the world, is to communicate that, hey, space needs every type of person. It's not just for rocket scientists, et cetera. It needs good marketing people. It needs salespeople. It needs all different types of personalities to come into this new space economy. Just like, you know, if we were talking about the crypto market 10 years ago, the crypto market needed to professionalize. Space doesn't necessarily need to professionalize. It needs to expand itself and how it views the commercial and the global market, because even the global market's quite segmented, right? So, you know, it's, once again, it's not easy, but this is, you know, my life's investment in a certain way. So if you're doing something valid, there's somebody in space who will listen, and it's a lot more reachable than people think. So, you know, if I could give anybody who's watching this any sort of inspiration, is, you know, most people have a passion for space. Space is very much a new and more open market than people realize, and it is a market that you can enter no matter what kind of person you are.
Awesome. So, Grant, I love what you just told us. We are running out of time, so one last question for you. Just tell us anything you want to share with our audience.
Well, first off, no matter what your thing is, emotionally, ideologically, spiritually, or whatever market you're focused on business-wise, figure out how you can leverage space. Space is going to affect pretty much every industry and market on Earth, especially things like satellite imagery and data. Try to get involved in space in even some small ways. For example, you know, on platform, we have our own assets we're releasing soon called our passports, which give you certain features, functions, benefits on our platform, access to unique things. Start getting involved in this market. It's very much like having a discussion over 10 years ago around crypto, et cetera. You can still plant your flag in this market and support, you know, companies, projects like ours that are risking it all themselves to build new foundations for this market in particular, and democratize that access once again, so that it's not just X amount of billionaires and big nation states, but this is an economy and an asset class, a space asset class that is owned by a diverse range of people around the world.
Completely agreed, Grant. Well, we have reached the end of our time. It was a pleasure talking to you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on. You're such a great entrepreneur, and I'm sure you're going to make a big splash in the space scene. Thank you so much.
And thanks for having me on, and thank you to Negocios TV. And thanks for all the support and the kind words. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Take care.
See you, bye.
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 That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed this interview with an entrepreneur that's bold, courageous, and pioneering. And thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.